If you're feeling lonely right now, know that you're not alone. As creepy as that sounds, right? And lonely and being alone are different. There are ways that you can cope with loneliness by just learning to actually be cool with being alone, being with self, right? But if you're grieving right now, if you've just lost a loved one, my heart goes out to you. And please allow yourself time to grieve. Allow yourself time to feel sad. Allow yourself time to have waves of just crying it out. Sometimes you can cry it out, just period. When you're going through big transformations, it's so often that you can cry it out. It's not what we've learned often in growing up because it's, only babies cry and we're trained in many ways not to feel. But it's so important to feel. And that's really what emotional intelligence is. And how to deal with loneliness is by actually having tea with it, having coffee with it, having a chat with it, asking yourself, what is it that is making me feel this loneliness? And if it is because you're grieving somebody who's passed on, it is often because you loved, right? So if you loved somebody who has passed on, give yourself the grace that you're grieving hard because you love big. And when you love big, you're going to grieve. You're going to miss that person, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing more important than, birth and death, really, and then everything in between, right? So, Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, and if you don't, happy Sunday or happy day, whatever day you're watching this. And if you're feeling sad, you're welcome, because now you probably feel more sad because you're like, great, now she's saying be happy. There's something wrong with me being unhappy. The first step to how to deal with loneliness is to first allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. Sometimes people feel the shame, right? I see it. We all see it, right? Online a lot. Somebody will actually reach out and then they get a lot of shame. But that's, other people's projections. But if you're not ready to all of a sudden be a therapist because you're hurting, that can be a tough spot. And that's so first have grace for yourself. And notice if you're getting shame from anybody else, so just be the witness. Become the witness of your own sadness, of your own loneliness. And that is a way to be with self, because then you're noticing who is the observer and who is the person experiencing this feeling of loneliness. And often you can talk yourself out of your significance. And I want to remind you that you are important. And this is a very important time in history. And everybody says that throughout history, but it actually is. It's a really important time in history. And we as a world have gone through a lot. And there's a lot of people that are in this cognitive dissonance, right? Friendships have split up over politics. Families, people have lost loved ones. And then now we're brushing it under the rug, many people, and acting like nothing happened. And so it's no wonder if you're feeling the loneliness, sometimes it's not even your own. If you're an empathetic person, which I think you are if you're even watching this, then sometimes you're feeling it of other people. Sometimes if you live in a big city, you're noticing it on the streets everywhere. There's a loneliness epidemic. And if you've been on this channel, you've probably watched some narcissist videos. And that can be a lonely walk. That can be a very uncomfortable walk to have experienced that. You begin to see, right, the light and dark everywhere. There's light and darkness everywhere. And when you begin to really see the darkness, sometimes that can feel really lonely. And sometimes when you notice your own light, that can feel lonely because you can be shunned for both. So what do you do with all that? At this time of Christmas, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, you probably know the story of Jesus, whether you adhere to the beliefs or not. I'm sure you've heard the story of Jesus, right? And I'm sure that you can agree that he was somebody that was shining truth and light and loving, and that the message was to love everyone, everywhere. And that's hard to do. You know, Ram Dass, who did all the acid tests and then became, a spiritual guru or something, because realized he didn't need any of the drugs, and wrote many books, Be Here Now and others, and studied with all these spiritual gurus, right? And when he studied with the Maharaja, he said, what is the secret to life? What do I need to know? And he said, love everyone. Ram Dass is like, it's a little difficult, right? And if you've experienced a narcissistic relationship and maybe been in the trauma bond, you can understand that it's really hard, that message of loving everyone and then not accepting a Hoover, not going back, because you're like, oh, I'm just loving everyone. But in loving everyone, you also love yourself. And sometimes in loving everyone, you're not agreeing or signing up for that behavior from them, but instead loving them as is. Instead of trying to control and say, I only love you if you behave the way that I want you to, instead you say, I love you as is no matter what, even if we don't speak, which is sometimes the healthiest thing, right? So if you're feeling a loneliness, one way how you can handle that is first to ask yourself, what is this feeling? Ask yourself like a scientist. As an acting teacher, when you have to go into these feelings and you're actually going into the emotional body deliberately to do a role, you look at it like a scientist. How does this feel in my body? Do that as the character in your own life. What does this feel like in my body? What is this here to teach me? This loneliness. I remember when I was in college, I had lived with roommates, and then I moved out by myself for the first time. And a lot of people were so scared of that. They're like, oh my gosh, that sounds awful. And at first I was scared. I was like, what is it going to be? The silence. And this is like before cell phones, right? In the Stone Ages. And I guess we had cell phones, but hardly anybody used them and hardly anybody had them, right? The flip phone, it was so fancy. And you weren't text messaging. My point is that you weren't spending all day, all night on your phone. And most of us, in college and have a TV, there were no computers. So when you were alone, you were alone. When I moved into that first apartment by myself in college, I was alone. And I think that's when I really began to feel more okay with being with self. So maybe you even have the thing where you can be a hermit. And you're like, Leah, I have no problem being alone. The problem is sometimes I get lonely because I'm so much with self that I don't even want to be with people. Maybe you're feeling a loneliness because you're missing that connection. So look at what is the feeling? What does it feel like in my body? Like actually like a scientist. It doesn't even have to make sense. It's hot, it's cold, it's tense, it's relaxed. and start noticing what feels better in your body. And it sounds so simple, but go towards the good feeling thoughts as the witness. Oh, when I start having this anxious thought of loneliness, I'm missing something. Often it's because you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed, maybe a past relationship, or if somebody has passed on, trying to go in the past. Now, of course, feel your feelings, but you're going to be anxious if you're trying to do the impossible, which is change the past. You can't do that. So a simple little adjustment is to say, who dat? When you hear that voice of, who is that speaking? Is that the light or the dark? A lot of people are talking about narcissism right now because really we are in a time of light and dark and that duality. And I mean, sometimes I feel like YouTube is like at one flew over the cuckoo's nest. You know, you're going into all these different rooms and everybody's, I mean, there's something for everybody and there is room for you. So sometimes a loneliness can feel like you don't belong, like nobody understands you, or if you've had a falling away of friends and family, whether they've passed on or because of politics or because the last few years have been cray-cray, you guys split up or you've gotten no contact with someone. I mean, there's a myriad of things, right? This human experience is wild and no one is exempt. So if any of that is making you feel lonely, I invite you to ask yourself, who is that speaking? Is that the lightness or is that the darkness? And what does it feel like in my body? And start becoming that witness. And that's how you can be with self. And then on the 26th, it's going to be the last full moon of the year. And that's another funny thing, right? In this stage play of life, there's some people who are super into the moon. There's some people who aren't. Some people say the whole thing is a simulation. Any of those concepts, I invite you to ask yourself as the witness, what are these concepts doing for me? How do they feel in my own body? And if it's a loneliness, what is this doing for me? Or what is it there to teach me? So with the 26th being the last full moon of the year, it could be a time that you could ask yourself, what am I willing to really let go of? Maybe this old pattern of beating yourself up. Maybe it's a loneliness and mourning there because you're beating yourself up, or maybe you've changed that pattern and weirdly you're missing it because it's a comfort zone, right? So sometimes we miss the thing. You go and you get into the new apartment and it's peace and quiet, but now you're missing the chaos because somehow that's comfortable. So become the witness and look at it. And then remember that you actually aren't alone. You are here for a reason. You matter. You do matter. And I wish you so much peace during this time. This can be a beautiful time. So whether you're with self, with other people, maybe you're with people. There's nothing lonelier really than being with a lot of people and feeling lonely, feeling misunderstood, feeling all on your own. So maybe you even are with a spouse but they don't understand you, or it's a narcissistic relationship. That can feel very, very lonely. So this can be a time to be that witness. And again, ask yourself, is this for my highest and best? Is this the lightness or the darkness speaking? What do I want to let go of in 2023 or any time? And what do I want to bring in 2024? I had wanted to do a video the last couple of weeks, and then I kind of just went off the grid for a myriad of different reasons. But then I realized it's so funny because all the videos I was trying to do, and some of them the audio and different things happened. But then I thought, but what I want to leave behind for me personally is this idea that it has to be done a certain way. And sometimes even me doing the video and it didn't work out, or there was no audio in the end, so then of course I don't post it because it would just be me doing hand gestures and you're like, what is she saying? There's no audio. But maybe that was just for me. So sometimes right now this loneliness can feel like maybe you're not being heard or seen in the way. But sometimes it's for you to be heard and seen for yourself. So these videos that I make, I intend to help whoever it's meant for. It's also meant for me to help me process some of this stuff. And that's why sometimes it's a little bit tricky. And then the funny YouTube thing is like, oh, I got this download, but it's true. Like, if you don't keep up with the download, sometimes you get this like creative congestion, right? So if you're feeling a loneliness, maybe it's because you're being invited to express somehow. Whether you make a video and put it up on YouTube, whether you make a video for yourself, if you write something, right? Sometimes it's just because it's a time to express. You can feel loneliness because you're not being seen or heard, but sometimes, again, it's not for somebody else to see or hear you, it's for yourself. Maybe you're beating yourself up because you've gone back to a narcissist. And in any of these case scenarios, I just invite you to return to love, to ask yourself who's speaking, and then to also, in moving forward, give yourself something to look forward to. And to circle back on this Christmas Eve, again, whether you celebrate or not, if it's Christmas to you, Merry Christmas, otherwise Happy Sunday, right? Or any day. It's your life. And the story of Jesus was a man who was living in this human experience, but embodying light and loving everybody, not condoning negative, bad behavior, but still shining light like the sun on everybody. So how can you shine that way for the rest of this year and into next year, where you heal this internal loneliness by being with self and then really appreciating whoever you are with at the time. Whether you're totally on your own, whether you're a single mom or parent, mom, dad, whatever, sometimes that's a lot to juggle. I can completely relate to that. I've been crying so much stuff out. So this is also a time of release. If you're crying stuff out, allow yourself that time and space to cry it out, and don't shame yourself. It's not meant to stay in your body. So that you actually can find this peace at this time. And if it's finances and you're feeling anxiety about that, so it's a loneliness, a craving for that, remember that no material thing can still take up this space. And I know it's easy when billionaires say that. The rest of us, I'm not a billionaire, maybe you are, can say, oh, easy for you to say, Mr. and Mrs. Billionaire, multi-gazillionaire, right? But the thing many of them say is that if everyone could just have that, we would know that that's not where it is either. Because it truly is an inside job. So you can feel lonely with a million people around, or you can feel lonely on your own, or you can feel with self and with self with a million people and cool and good, even inside of sadness. There's a beauty in releasing that stuff. So if you're noticing stuff come up for you, allow it. Like, tears were coming to me in watching the movie Sing with my daughter, right? Or like crying at a commercial. I'm just so open. But remember, that's also your talent. And any artist knows you have to be open and vulnerable to be able to feel and then express and connect. So don't shame yourself if you're feeling really sensitive right now. How to deal with loneliness is to allow it, witness it, and love yourself anyway. So I'm wishing you a happy full moon. There's a full moon meditation I'll link maybe, or you can look it up. I have meditations on here. Find what works for you. I always laugh, right? Because I even got a comment recently on the F-It meditation I did. And somebody's like, men do it better. And I actually agree, because I didn't like my delivery on that, because it was totally spontaneous and it wasn't rehearsed. And as a director later, I was like, that's not how I would have done it. But I was like, F it, which is what the meditation is. It's F it. So it was kind of this funny double entendre. So I just posted it anyway. So now it's funny to me. I can be the witness when I get comments like that. It doesn't mean it could be better, but we always can be better. So F it on this Christmas Eve. Isn't that a special Christmas message? I mean, in the best of ways. Okay, I should have quit while I was ahead. I'll see you next time. So much love to you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy life, light, love, peace.